A lot of people are trying to say this whole flat earth thing is a psyop. It started with the CIA or some other, the Illuminati or whatever. If it's a psyop, it started with Moses. In Genesis chapter 1. Let's go through it. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Here we go. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Well, that word firmament comes from the Hebrew word rakia. Strong's number 7549 describes it as an extended surface, as if beaten out. It's an expanse. You see the descriptions there. Firmament regarded as by the Hebrews as solid and supporting the waters above it. Now, a lot of scholars are out there today suggesting or demanding that the word firmament is simply an expanse. It's the expanse of the air, the atmosphere, and the vacuum of space. Have you heard that before? The firmament is just an expanse. Anybody heard that before? I hear it from my detractors all the time. Funny thing is, the Hebrews and the Greeks disagree with that, especially the Hebrew scholars that took their Hebrew text and translated the Hebrew into Greek. So these are Hebrew people who understand their Hebrew culture, their Hebrew scriptures. They took the Hebrew words and translated them into Greek for the Septuagint. And the word that they chose for the Hebrew word rakia, when they translated it into Greek, was stereoma. And that word, the origin of that word, is a combining form borrowed from Greek where it meant solid, used with reference to hardness, solidity, three-dimensionality in the formation of compound words. And when you just look at other online resources such as blueletterbible.com, look up the word rakia, you'll see right there it's an extended surface, solid, expanse, firmament, expanse, flat as base, support, firmament of a vault of heaven supporting waters above, considered by Hebrews as solid and supporting waters above. Over and over and over again, you see that the Hebrews understood it to be solid. The word rakia comes from a root word raka. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing these words wrong. And when you look up that word, that root word, it talks about to beat, to stamp out, to spread out, to stretch, to stamp out, to beat out, like when you're pounding metal. Spreading metal out by beating on it. I don't know how you can beat on air to create an expanse. And Job, which I believe actually predates Genesis, comes right out and tells you. In Job chapter 37, verse 18, pick your translation. I grew up in the King James. So the King James says, hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong as a molten looking glass? What's a molten looking glass? It's a mirror made out of beaten down metal. I mean, Job comes right out and tells you this thing is hard. It's like a molten mirror. We know why it's hard. It talks about in Genesis because it's holding waters back from above. It's separated waters above from waters beneath. We see in Ezekiel 1:26, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne. Yahuwah is the pronunciation that I have chosen for the Tetragrammaton. I am not dogmatic about that. I know some people, it's Yahweh or it's Jehovah or Yehovah. I've kind of gone through all of them in the course of my journey, looking at the various pronunciations of 4 consonants. I've landed on Yahuwah. If you say Yahweh, I'm good with that too. So I don't think it's worth fighting about. We're doing the best we can with 4 consonants. But we see that his throne is sitting on top of this structure, according to Ezekiel. We see in Isaiah, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. We see in Amos chapter 9, verse 6, the one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and has founded his vaulted dome. The word is aguda, a structure fitted together over the earth. He who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth, the Lord Yahuwah is his name. Amos 9:6 is a very interesting passage of scripture. And the King James says he founds his troop on the earth. Don't really know what that means. New International Version, however, says that he builds his lofty place in the heavens and sets its foundation on the earth. New Living Translation says that the Lord's home reaches up to the heavens while its foundation is on the earth.
The English Standard Version says, who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and founds his vault upon the earth. The New American Standard Bible is the most interesting one to me. It says, the one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and has founded his vaulted dome over the earth. Of course, King James talks about founded his troop on the earth. Holman Christian Standard Bible says he builds his upper chambers in the heavens and lays the foundation of his vault on the earth. International Standard Version says, who builds his stairway to heaven and setting its foundation on earth. The Net Bible says he builds his upper rooms of his palace in heaven and sets its foundation supports on the earth. And the New Heart English Bible says he builds his chambers in the heavens and has founded his vault on the earth. God's Word translation says stairs up to heaven and sets his foundation on the earth. And the JPS Tanakh 1917 says he builds his upper chambers in the heaven and has founded his vault upon the earth. So what's going on with all that? Well, we talked a little bit about that in the interview I did with Zen Garcia, so I'll just play that for you here. Very interesting discussion concerning Amos 9:6. Let's talk some more about the vaulted dome. You mentioned I love BibleHub.com also, and earlier you talked about Amos 9:6, which is, if you're a King James only guy, you completely miss it. King James says, it is he that buildeth his stories in the heaven and hath founded his troop in the earth. You're like, what? But like all the other translations pretty much talk about this vault that's set upon the earth, and the New American Standard is the one that just comes right out and calls it a vaulted dome. But many of the other ones use the word vault also. And although the King James 2000, kind of a newer, updated version of the King James, also uses vault. So what did you find? Why did the King James use troop? Did you look into that at all? Or
Well, when you look up the word aguda, which is the Hebrew word which they use, well, the King James translates that as troop. It actually speaks about binding, like in a group of men, which is why they used the King James translated as troop, or binding in this case, the firmament to the earth, which makes a lot more sense. Because if you read the first portion of the chapter or the passage, it says the one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens. So it's actually speaking about first where the Most High God sits upon the dome of the earth and where the heavenly temple is created. And in my mind, and I explained this in great detail in this particular chapter, that when you look at the context of the passage, it should be translated as the vaulted dome which binds the earth to the firmament.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, because right in the King James, it's he that buildeth his stories in the heavens. So you got this idea of stories or levels being built in heaven, but founded his troop, his was it Aguda?
Yes, Aguda.
Being like bound together, attached, as it were, to the earth.
Right.
Ah, that's awesome.
Which, if you look at the word Aguda, the definitions are band, binding, cords, bands, thongs, slavery, bunch of hyssop, a band of men or troops, and the fourth one, vault of the heavens or firmament, as in binding the earth to the heavens.
Wow, that is awesome.
And we see in Scripture it's like a tent. We see a metaphor being used there. And God called the firmament, the rakia, beaten down metallic structure, heaven, shamayim. We see in Isaiah 40, 21 and 22, a lot of people, when we start talking about this idea of the shape and nature of the earth, we'll go to Isaiah 40, 22. Have you heard people do that before? Have you done that before? Circle the earth, right? I've used it myself many times. See? Circle the earth. Proves this is a globe. Interesting, most people leave out verse 21. Have you not known, have you not heard, hath it not been told you from the beginning, i.e. in the beginning of the Torah, Genesis? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, that stretcheth out the heavens, the shamayim, as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in. Well, I may not understand Hebrew, but I think whatever language you're talking about, words mean things. Language 101, words mean things. And the prophet Isaiah knew the difference between a ball and a circle, because he used the Hebrew word for ball in Isaiah 22:18, but he chose a different word for Isaiah 40:22. So I'm looking at them going, okay, Isaiah knew the difference, the King James translators knew the difference. Do we know the difference? Google helps you out. You could go to Google and type in ball. You could go in Google and type in circle, and you might see something like that depicted there. So here's a little quiz. Which one do you think is which? This is a ball. This is a circle, boys and girls. So then the next thing people go is, well, look at everything else out there, Mars and Jupiter and Venus and the sun and moon, everything else is spherical, so we must be too. Well, I mean, okay. Just because these balls are round, does that mean the courts, fields, lanes, tables must be too? Does that demand ipso facto, if the billiard balls are all spherical, that the pool table must be too? No. Biblically speaking, this place is center stage, main attraction. Everything else is up there to serve a purpose for those who are here. And you look at Isaiah 40:22, again, King James uses circle. The International Standard Version, which some of my detractors hold up as a really good translation. I'm going, okay, you guys think this is great. You love this translation. Look at how they wrote it. The disk of the earth. Also, we note that it says that heaven is stretched out like a tent to dwell in. Well, I mean, they're using a metaphor there. I mean, in their time, this would be a tent. A structure set up over a flat surface. Perhaps even a structure like this, a yurt. Or more modern times, you might think of something like a dome tent. Now, as I started doing this research, I'm having all the same thoughts you're having. And I'm getting really frustrated by this whole thing. And people are constantly telling me I'm crazy for even looking into it. And it was getting harder. It was really getting very difficult, especially in the beginning. I've been looking into this stuff since April 15th of 2015. Almost nonstop. I've become obsessed with it, actually. And I was ready to throw in the towel. I was just like, everybody's calling me a psycho, crazy lunatic, and, writing me off as, whatever. And, it wears on you after a while. People calling you names every day. And I was ready to throw in the towel. I was done. Then I got this package in the mail. And I am a very busy person. And if it's more than like a page or so, it goes into the I'll get to it later pile, which I almost never get around to getting back to it. Then this guy called me, and I'm really hard to get a hold of by phone. And the only time I take or make phone calls is when I'm in my car. And this guy happened to call me when I was in my car and said, did you get a package from this guy named Andrew Hoy? And I said, the name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. He said, well, you need to look and see if you got a package for him, because if you did, you've got to open it and check it out. I thought, okay. So when I got home, looked through my pile, I found the package, and it was this big 8.5 by 11 sheet or envelope. It was about this thick. I go, oh boy, here we go. So I open up, I read the cover letter, and then I open through it. This guy's a structural engineer and a Hebrew scholar. And he spent a lot of time in Israel studying the tabernacle in the wilderness. And as a structural engineer, he's looking at all the various models that you can see that people have in museums and whatnot of the tabernacle in the wilderness. And you guys have all seen the same thing too, this long rectangular box, right? Tabernacle in the wilderness. Now the Torah says that you cannot add to it or subtract from it. It comes with a very strict command. Are you guys familiar with that in the Torah? It says do not add to it and do not subtract from it. So here's Andrew, structural engineer, is looking at this box structure, which is the least structural supported thing you can make out in the wilderness. And because it is is poorly, it's not very structurally sound, they have to add extra poles and extra rope and extra pegs and all kinds of extra stuff to make that thing stand upright and stay upright in wind and rain and things like that. So he's stuck. He's like, look, Moses was given blueprints from something he saw up in the heavenlies that he was supposed to emulate here on earth. He was given a very specific itemized shopping list to hand off to Bezalel, who was the guy and his friend who were supposed to construct all this stuff. So he's saying, well, all these people have added all kinds of things to the itemized list that weren't given to them. So he really struggled with it. And he was like, why did they even come up with a rectangular box with multiple layers of cloth on the roof? And he realized it's because of the description of the curtains that are given in the text. It gives this description of these curtains that are long rectangular strips. And it just says connect them at the ends. Well, everybody assumes that you connect them at the long end. And when you do that, you end up with a rectangular box. But there's nothing in the text that demands that. So he thought, well, what if you connected them at the short ends? What would happen? When he did that, he ended up with a very large circular dome tent, 6 stories high, without adding or subtracting any items to the list. Wow! A 6-story high dome tent with the pillar of fire going down through the middle of it. So you can imagine that was a pretty impressive sight in the wilderness if this model is true. But you got to understand my mindset at this point. I've been studying this whole firmament and this dome circular world and all this stuff for quite some time, ready to throw in the towel. I'm giving up, and I get this in the mail. And this guy, he doesn't have anything to do with flat Earth or anything like that, not even remotely on his mind. But he designs this thing, and he realizes that pi very much plays a part of this design. And so he starts looking up pictures of the globe that he could use that are royalty-free images that he can use for his promotional materials. And he's trying to get support in Israel and stuff for people to look into this model. And as he started looking into the pictures of the globe, he found the same problems that I found when you start looking into pictures of the globe. Many, if not all, of the pictures you see of the globe in your textbooks and stuff like that are composite images. They're CGI. And many times it even says so in the fine print. But the more I started looking into it and started realizing how much of those images were not actual photographs of the Earth, and seeing images of the Earth in 25 hours animation, and none of the clouds are moving as this thing's rotating in 25 hours, I started to question the globe. Well, he started stumbling along the same things that I did, and in the course of his research, again, he's of a globular spinning heliocentric Earth model. He builds this thing, he's doing his research, he stumbles on the same stuff I stumbled on, and then found my research, and he said, I got to contact this guy. So he sends this package to me when I'm about ready to give up. And I had just created this design right here when I was trying to take the scriptures literally, just reading the text, not bringing preconceived bias to it. What would I envision just by reading the text? That's what I came up with. So I've got this design, he's got that design, he says we need to talk. We've had some very interesting conversations. If you'd like to learn more about his design, his website is project314.org. Highly recommend it.
For those of you who follow me on Facebook, you might remember that on August 23rd, I posted this article right here that Andrew Hoy sent me. He apparently had been interviewed by breakingisraelnews.com. Biblical Tabernacle is nothing like what you think. Bible savvy engineer. And I posted the video archive August 25th from the Revolutionary Radio Project interview I did with Andy back in December of 2015. And apparently the same day, Skywatch TV picked up the story. They've got an article right here linking to the same interview that he did. If you click on that, it takes you to the Breaking Israel News, latest news, biblical perspective article. I'm going to go ahead and read that for you here. Biblical Tabernacle is nothing like what you think, says Bible savvy engineer. And they came, every one whose heart stirred him up, and every one whom his spirit made willing, and brought Hashem's offering for the work of the tent of meeting, and for all the service thereof, and for the holy garments. Exodus 35:21, the Israel Bible. There's a picture of Andrew's model. The biblical tabernacle, or tent of meeting, may have been not a modest rectangular tent as scholars have believed for centuries, but an enormous circular structure 6 stories tall, proposes a Wisconsin engineer who has spent years studying the intricacies of the biblical text describing the desert structure. And there's a link to Andrew Hoy's name right there. It takes you to his website, project314.org, and you can read about Andrew's discovery, a little bit about who he is. And, I encourage you guys to spend some time on this website. I like many people, I believed in this model. I've taught about it myself. I've got lots of charts, fold out maps and all kinds of stuff that show this tabernacle, and lots of Torah teachers out there have done a whole lot of teaching on this. So this is another one of those situations where it could be that we have to overcome a great deal of cognitive dissonance. We've all believed this model, but what if it's not true? And, I had all the same knee-jerk reactions everybody has when that has looked at this model, and has believed in this model before. You have all the, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? I spent many hours with Andrew pulling the yeah, but routine. And, he walked me through his thinking. And more importantly, he walked me through the scriptures. And when he got to the part where this model right here requires a whole lot of other additional items that are not in the shopping list, that were the itemized list of materials that Moses was given. He was shown a blueprint by God himself, by Yahuwah. He said, hey, here's the deal. Here's what I want you to build, and here's what you need to build it. And the Torah specifically says, do not add nor subtract from it. Comes with a warning, as a matter of fact. Don't do that. So that's what caught my attention. There was a lot of other arguments that Andrew gave that were very compelling, but he's like, I was just looking at the text and realized, as a structural engineer, you have to add different ropes and pegs and different things to this structure to make it work. And if you do that, then you're adding to the Torah. You're adding items to the list that were not given to Moses as a requirement for building this structure. And I got to say, that was what really convinced me. But if you spend more time on this website, project314.org, and look at the various items that Betzalel was given as instructions from Moses, Moses, of course, receiving the blueprint from God himself, I got to tell you, it's rather convincing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why this is so exciting to me. Some of you may have already guessed it. But yeah, go to this webpage, spend some time here looking at this. And I would also recommend that you go to this page right here, Design, and click on Outside the Box. And if you click on the Outside the Box link, he's got 20 reasons to question the rectangular tabernacle designs and engineering problems with it. And there's a lot of really compelling arguments here, in my opinion. So spend some time checking that out. Okay, let me go back to the article. Andrew Hoy, a trained mechanical engineer from Milwaukee, currently in Israel to investigate his theory, has developed a concept which challenges every known belief about the portable central structure Israel used to serve God for 400 years until the first temple was built. Hoy has a head for numbers and a passion for the Bible. Raised in the Lutheran Church, his personal journey led him to leave that church. He studied in Yeshiva Religious Seminary in Jerusalem for a period where he concentrated on learning Hebrew in order to study the Bible in its original form. When Hoy read the sections in Exodus dealing with the construction of the tabernacle, listing in detail the materials used, it raised many questions for him. He was familiar with the full-scale models of the tabernacle at Timna Park and Ariel in Israel, and realized that there were many discrepancies between these examples and the biblical text. Well, surprise, surprise, right? How many things do we see completely different today in what we believe from what the scriptures actually teach? Most scholarly theories describe the tabernacle as a rectangular tent. The 11 sheets described in the Bible, each measuring 4 cubits by 30, were attached to each other with loops and on opposite edges. Using the loops to attach the sheets, the Bible instructs to join all sheets together into a single sheet and to fold the 11th sheet back over upon itself. Exodus 26:3 says, 5 curtains shall be coupled together one to another, and the other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. It is traditionally assumed that these curtains are joined together in a top to bottom arrangement to make one large rectangular sheet that becomes a rectangular tent. This rendition, however, fails to comply with the exact Exodus specifications, which offers no provisions for unjoined edges and describes all sheets as having loop joints on both edges. Here's a depiction from an artist rendition in 1911, apparently. Illustrated History of the Bible by John Quito. Hoy approached this as an engineering problem. The sum of the 11 sheets measuring 30 cubits minus the end sheet overlap and minus the nominal 1 cubit overlap adjustment is expressed as 30 times 11 minus 30 divided by 2 minus 1. If I understood that equation properly. Exodus 26:12. And as for the overhanging part that remaineth of the curtains of the tent, the half curtain that remaineth over shall hang over the back of the tabernacle. Hoy's eureka moment came when he realized that the final length arranged to enclose a circle would give a circumference of 314 cubits, which is a near perfect multiple of the mathematical constant known as pi. The dimensions for the courtyard created by this circular arrangement conform perfectly to the biblical description of being exactly 100 cubits long, i.e. in diameter, with the north and south portions each measuring 50 cubits wide, i.e. the radius. The tabernacle enclosed, constructed in a similar manner, became a decagon. Who makes a tent that is 4 layers thick in the desert with walls made out of beams 2 feet thick? Hoy asked rhetorically. The rectangular version uses a lot of material they just don't have permission in the Bible to use, he explained to Breaking Israel News. He was also perplexed by the methods most scholarly works describe for construction of the walls for the courtyard, describing walls made of solid timber connected by rods. It's cumbersome and uses a lot more wood than listed in the Bible. The biggest problem comes in using silver as a base for the timbers, Hoy noted. They were permitted 100 talents of silver, weighing a total of 4 tons. Making the bases out of silver would require many more tons of silver that were just not accounted for in the Bible. As an engineer, I understood the silver and brass as being used for struts as part of the dome's structure. Hoy envisioned a circle of linen and wool sheets capped by a huge leather enclosure. Using his engineering skills and adhering to the exact quantities of wood and silver specified in the Bible, he designed a tent similar to the traditional yurts used in Mongolia. Hoy's version, based on the Bible's technical instructions, is an astounding 6 stories tall. And here again is his depiction superimposed over the traditional view. Hoy has created a complete set of plans for the circular tabernacle on design software down to the tiniest hardware in the hopes of creating a scale model based on his circular concept. He has spent hundreds of hours checking his theory from an engineering perspective and also for biblical adherence. There are many practical reasons Hoy believes in a circular tabernacle. Practically, a yurt stands up better to high winds than a square tent, Hoy stated. It makes more sense to order the tribes in a circular camp than in rectangles with gaps in the corners. Also, the tabernacle impressed the other nations. A 6-story tall dome would certainly do that. His trip to Israel has 2 purposes: to investigate archaeological clues to substantiate his theory of a circular tabernacle and to gain support for it. The tabernacle accompanied the Jews wandering in the desert but stood in Shiloh for over 300 years. As a theoretically portable structure dismantled 3,000 years ago, the first goal is improbable at best. Here's another picture from Wiki Commons of the traditional view. His second goal is proving even more difficult, since one look at his architectural designs challenges biblical scholars to reconsider so much of what they thought about the tabernacle and the socio-political aspects of Israel connected to it. I think that restoration of personal study is really important. To look at the text for yourself with a critical eye, Hoy told Breaking Israel News. I wasn't looking for this, but when I began to study the verses about the tabernacle, this is what became clear to me as being the absolute truth. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to the interview that I did with him, again, I just posted that on YouTube, so you can check that out. And now Derek Gilbert also gave a sort of a passing reference to this in a Skywatch TV news blurb that he did. Here's his take on it.
And finally, the tabernacle. This was the tent of meeting that the Israelites used for 400 years between the time of Mount Sinai and the building of Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. May be completely different than what we've been taught. Traditionally, it's been depicted as a modest rectangular tent surrounded by a screen. Well, a mechanical engineer in Milwaukee, Andrew Hoy, has developed a new concept based on the materials described or specified in the Bible. He said that materials better fit this shape. That would be 60 feet tall, by the way, to account for all of the materials. Now, this shape, which is like similar to the yurt that's used in Mongolia, would actually stand up better in high winds than the rectangular tabernacle. And consider this, because the Bible is a record of human history, from being kicked out of the garden, which was on God's holy mountain. Look that up, it's Ezekiel 28, God's holy mountain, and we're all about getting back to God's holy mountain, which will be the Temple Mount, Mount Zion in Jerusalem. The tabernacle is a representation of Eden. The most holy place where God met with Moses was separated from the holy place by a curtain into which two giant cherubim were woven, just like the cherubim who guarded the entrance at the east of Eden, guarded the way to the tree of life. The menorah inside the holy place, the candle holder, represented the tree of life. The law inside the ark of the covenant, representing the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Right. So is it possible that the external shape of the tabernacle is also to represent a mountain? And certainly this shape looks more like a mountain than the rectangle. And after all, there are some who believe that the New Jerusalem will be a pyramid rather than a cube. When you look at the dimensions that are specified in the book of Revelation, they're the same whether the shape is a cube or a pyramid, which again looks more like a mountain than a cube.
Now, of course, if you've been following my work over the past year or so, with all the research I've been doing regarding the circular still flat earth set on pillars under a dome, within which the sun, moon, and stars were placed on day 4, what I am now calling the biblical Earth model, you know I have a different take. Is it talking about a mountain, or was it more likely that, based on the Hebrew cosmological worldview, God was just showing Moses his footstool? Now, if that's true, that would be unbelievably huge confirmation of the Hebraic cosmological worldview depicted in a practical structure that is our world in which God himself desires to dwell with his creation. Now, I must point out that I am not saying that Andrew Hoy is a flat earther and that and I'm definitely not saying that he created this model as some way of trying to support that idea. Quite the opposite, actually. Now, you'll have to talk to him as to whatever his views are regarding the shape and nature of our world and its place in the cosmos. But I could just tell you, the way I ended up finding out about him in the first place was about this time last year. Many of you know, it was actually August 16th. I was taking so much ridicule and flack and name calling and just mean-spirited people attacking me from every corner you can imagine, that I decided, you know what, forget it. I'm done. I'm taking my Testing the Globe website down. I put the Phil Collins song "I Don't Care Anymore" up on every single page, and said, forget it. I'm done. Then I got a bunch of letters from people, both handwritten as well as emailed to me. One in particular that was sent to me was handwritten by an atheist, and he was sharing his testimony and how this research led him to a belief that there has to be a God. I've often joked about it, that there are no atheists in foxholes. Well, there are no atheists in a terrarium either. And this person had taken time to watch the videos, unlike other people who ridicule and condemn without investigation. This person had taken time to look at the various videos that I've produced. They read the many pages that I have written on the subject, and they came to the conclusion, that's the truth, and God's right above us, and I now believe in God, so I better get right with him. And, and in a polite way, but in a firm way, this person rebuked me for taking all that information down. They said, "How dare you? I mean, do you not believe what you're saying?" And it was a polite but firm rebuke. And then he ended his letter by saying, "I'm going to say something I've never said before," and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, "May God grant you the grace and the courage and the strength to continue on the path that He's placed you on." And wow, I mean, it really hit me. And I put the site back up on August 20th, I believe it was. I think I took it down on the 16th. If I remember, I put it up on the 20th. And within days of that, my wife's father died. My father-in-law died in our living room. We had hospice and everything. And I was at a season when I was going through a lot of physical pain myself. I had really bad back problems and sciatica so bad that I could barely move without being in just terrible pain. And so, I mean, it was a rough season. I can't even convey to you everything that was going on at that time. And, here I am just asking questions at that time. I'm just like, hey, this is interesting. And wow, look what the Bible says. And just trying to figure this stuff out for myself, and realized, what? People don't appreciate you asking questions, and they will go completely psycho on you. And they were. So between people going psycho on me, between my back problems, and we had lost pretty much all financial support. My monthly contributions were way down. My monthly sales were almost non-existent. I mean, for a number of years now, with the books and DVDs that I have out, we have a pretty consistent amount of sales every week that I can usually count on. And that had all dried up because apparently everybody thought I was crazy. I mean, if you go to look on the customer reviews on some of my books on Amazon, you'll see people like, yeah, I was interested in this book at first. Then I found out that this guy's a flat earther. So how smart could he be? And, this guy must be an idiot. So I stopped reading, So, I mean, that was the mindset. People are like, Skiba's lost his mind. And, I had $800 to my name, and we were going to have to, bury my wife's father, and, all kinds of stuff was going on. And I was beaten down. I mean, I don't know what else to say, except I was ready to throw the towel in for sure. And it was in that season that I get this package in the mail from Andrew Hoy. Now, he was not even, flat earth and all that stuff was not even remotely on his radar. He was just realizing from his own research as a structural engineer, as a Hebrew scholar, and just looking at the text and not adding anything to it, just taking the itemized shopping list as it was. And he comes up with this model. And when he realized that it represented pi, he was trying to associate the globe with it, and was coming, isn't this beautiful? This represents the globe. And in the process of trying to find, as I remember the story, and I could be wrong about this, but as I remember him telling me the story, he was trying to find royalty-free images that he could use legitimately of the Earth to, put on the website and stuff, and to use as potential support for his model here. But he kept running into the same thing I did, that when you start looking at these pictures, you start seeing words like composite and rendering and, all these things that show this is not a legitimate picture of the Earth. And in the process of doing that, he stumbles across my work. And when I was doing the same questioning, like, what the heck, all these Earths, and look at all this discrepancy, and look at these clone tools, and, do we actually have any representations of the Earth that are real and legitimate? And, various different scales, all the colors always wrong. You got Apollo 11 faking the Earth through the oval window of the capsule. I mean, just lots of stuff. Well, he starts stumbling on some of this stuff, sees this model that I've created of the circular dome enclosed world, and he's going, I think I need to contact this guy. So he sends the stuff, and long story short, I finally get a chance to look at his material. I look at it, and this is when, again, I'm ready to throw the towel on this whole deal. I'm like, man, I just, it was causing more trouble than it was worth. And I see this, and I'm like, really, God, are you kidding me? Could it really be that the tabernacle in the wilderness was a scaled down representation of Yahuwah's footstool? Seriously? and we engaged in some phone conversation for a while. He ended up coming to visit me and spoke at our home Bible study fellowship at Kevin and Amanda's, gave a presentation there, and then of course I ended up having him on my radio show, which aired the end of December, the beginning of this year, January 2016. And as I continued doing some of my other independent studies, we were doing our Torah portion in the book of Numbers, and thinking about the Levites. I want to point something out to you. If you go back to Numbers chapter 1, it says, "For the Lord had spoken unto Moses, saying, Only thou shalt not number the tribe of Levi, neither take the sum of them among the children of Israel, but thou shalt appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony." So they're put in charge of the tabernacle. "And over the vessels thereof, and over the things that belong to it, they shall bear the tabernacle, and all the vessels thereof, and they shall minister unto it, and shall encamp round about the tabernacle." Round about? "And when the tabernacle setteth forth, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. And the children of Israel shall pitch their tents, every man by his own camp, and every man by his own standard throughout their hosts. But the Levites shall pitch round about the tabernacle of testimony, that there be no wrath upon the congregation of the children of Israel. And the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of testimony." Now, I suppose you could say that they were just camping all around the tabernacle. Okay, sure. But could they be literally camped around a round tabernacle? I'm just saying, maybe we take this a little bit more literally. In fact, if this is accurately depicted, I wonder if that's what this whole outer area is right here. Maybe their tents were along this perimeter all the way around it. I wonder if there's anything, I'm just thinking out loud here, I wonder if there's anything that would prohibit them from sleeping on the inside of this thing too. Or maybe the inside is just for all the animals. I mean, if you think about all the animals that are sacrificed at various times, especially like during Sukkot, I mean, just read through the book of Leviticus at the number of animals that are sacrificed. Where do they put all those animals? Maybe that's why this is so big. I don't know. When you get to Numbers chapter 3, we find out how many Levites there were, at least at this census, when they took the census here. And all that were numbered of the Levites, which Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord throughout their families, all the males from a month old and upward, were 20 and 2,000. So there's 22,000 Levites at the time of this census in Numbers chapter 3. Well, the reason I went back to look at that stuff was because not too long ago we did our Torah portion on Numbers chapter 18, and I was looking at verses 6 through 10 in particular, where it says, "And I, behold, I have taken your brethren, the Levites, from among the children of Israel to you. They are given as a gift for the Lord, to do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Therefore thou and thy sons with thee shall keep your priest's office for everything of the altar and within the veil, and ye shall serve. I have given your priest's office unto you as a service of gift, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, Behold, I also have given thee the charge of mine heave offerings, of all the hallowed things of the children of Israel. Unto thee have I given them by reason of the anointing, and to thy sons by an ordinance forever. This shall be thine of the most holy things, reserved from the fire, every oblation of theirs, every meat offering of theirs, and every sin offering of theirs, and every trespass offering of theirs, which they shall render unto me, shall be most holy for thee and for thy sons." This is what caught my attention in verse 10. In the most holy place shalt thou eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy unto thee. So every male is commanded to eat of this in the most holy place. Well, I mean, if you look at the scale that's typically depicted in the rectangular box, how do you get 22,000 people to eat inside of there? Whereas if you look at the scale of Andrew's model, I wrote to him after we did this Torah portion. I said, hey, Andy, because when he spoke at our home fellowship, I was like, well, I mean, I understand the Holy of Holies where the Ark of the Covenant was, would be the center column, if you will, inside the dome. That's not a very large space. So what's going on in the rest of it? Why is there so much empty space? What would be going on there? Well, what if it's a big cafeteria? What if it's a storage place for the animals at some points, for the sacrifices? What if it's a cafeteria for when they do the sacrifices for them to go in there? I don't think you could fit 22,000 people in there, at least not very comfortably, but I could see it being a lot more feasible doing shifts in a large, something that looks like a circus tent than in that tiny little rectangular box. Numbers 18 verse 10, at least for me, was very compelling potential evidence to support Andrew's model. That and the fact that we got to remember, Isaiah said that the heavens or the sky, the firmament, was stretched out like a tent to dwell in over a circular earth. A tent to dwell in does not fit any idea or any notion of an expanse as in atmosphere, air, and the vacuum of space.